now by our good friend Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports. I got to admit, Dave, I've listened to you a lot, especially with us being on the Big Bill King show every day. But good to have you here. Excited to have you. How are you this morning, my friend?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. I certainly appreciate it. You watch that Bill; he'll get you into trouble.
Hey, I will admit I've gotten in my fair share of trouble over the years saying some things on the show. I got to admit, but it's always a good time, a fun time. Dave, thank you again for joining us. But I got to start off with this: Tennessee men's basketball on an absolutely fantastic run here in the regular season. As we start to round down the regular season, getting into tournament play, obviously going into the tournament, how far do you think that this men's basketball team can make it?
They can win it all. I mean, they have that type of ability. And then do you go into, I think you mentioned regular season Rick, which our friend Bill King likes to refer to. I mean, that the history is a history. You have several elite teams, and you have Kevin Durant on your roster, and you made one Final Four in your 30 years of coaching, 800 wins. So I think that's the biggest concern. Can win it all. But will they is a whole different question. And I think the one thing that separates this team maybe from some other teams is they've got a guy that's named Dalton Connect that I think can manufacture points if they're having trouble. So I think he makes them different, but your guess is as good as mine if Rick Barnes can get past the Elite Eight in the NCAA tournament. He hasn't very often.
Is Connect the best player in college basketball right now?
No, I'd probably still go with Zach Edey at Purdue, just because of what he's established. He's a down low player, and this time and age, he's really weird. It's like, what would Shaq do in the NBA now? There's not a real down low back to the basket player, but he's kind of that a little bit. So I understand him getting it. It's kind of like the Heisman. Some preseason hype probably helps.
Right.
But I think Dalton Connect can prove to be one of the most important players in the tournament if Tennessee goes through a slow shooting streak, which they're known to do.
Any thoughts on – I mean, I don't think they're going to be a top 4 seed in my opinion regardless, but do you think that they need to make a little run and make some noise in the SEC tournament? I don't think they do, but do they?
I don't think they factor the SEC tournament and conference tournaments nearly as much as they did. I think it's the first win or two. As long as you don't fade out in the first round, I think you're fine. And really, you talk about putting together a bracket and the pod system they have to be able to do that from Saturday to Sunday based off who makes the conference championship game or who wins. It's pretty difficult to do. So Tennessee did end with Auburn and then Alabama in this past week, both ranked teams. They'll close with South Carolina on Wednesday on the road, and then Kentucky at home. That's as tough of a Final Four games as you're going to find out there. Those are all top 25 ranked teams. So I think personally, and Blake, I could be wrong, I think if Tennessee wins one of these games, and that would be 3 of 4 down the stretch, and doesn't fade out very first game of the tournament, wins a game, I think they're a 1 seed. I think that's base minimum for getting in, and they might be a 1 seed without it. But I think you need to do that to feel good when you lay your head on your pillow that Saturday night before Selection Sunday.
Well, I just, like you mentioned, I don't know if anybody has a tougher slate. And if you go 3-1, you win a game or two in the tournament. I mean, what else do they have to prove? What else do they have to do not to be there? Would be my question. Who would get it over them? Would be something completely different. It's going to be fun. I always love, sitting in the studio here and watching March Madness be crazy like it always is. So it's going to be a fun time. Dave, we're a college football show here, so I gotta move quickly over to football. Nico Iamaleava, I hope I'm saying his last name wrong. People tell me I say it wrong all the time. But Nico taking over at quarterback. Joe Milton out, Nico in. The bowl game was so good. I think that Nico did some very special things. I guess now going into spring, what are a couple of things that you're looking forward to seeing this spring?
Well, I actually had to do this so that I could completely get it right. So that's actually him pronouncing his last name. So I kept working on that, and finally I was able to get that Iamaleava. But I was the same way up until like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was the guy that covers Tennessee that can't pronounce the quarterback's name. So, okay, Two things. One, I don't put a lot of stock in newcomers. He's not a freshman. He's a redshirt freshman, but I don't put a lot of stock in newcomers. I'm not the guy that gets overly excited about the first guy that walks in the door. So I hope people know that. I hope my reputation from covering recruiting speaks to that. But I've not heard one even slightly negative thing about this young man. I've heard that the way he commands a presence in a quarterback room, in a huddle, his physical ability is unquestioned. I think it's, and I compare it to Bryce Young. A lot of other people have too. His ability to, I would say, be able to bring the game in and be able to move forward, make decisions, to be able to decipher information quickly is going to be really special. So I say all that not to try to overhype the young man, because he's got plenty of hype, but I think he's going to be that special and that good. I think he'll be one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the SEC, and I think he'll be one of the top 10 in the nation at the end of the year.
You know, Dave, when he in the bowl game, a lot of young quarterbacks like to go right, go left. They don't like going back up through the middle. They don't want to get hit. They don't want to get tackled. And I thought it wasn't the big arm. It wasn't the running ability, because I feel like we all knew that was something that he could do. But him being able to continue to look down the field to try to get completions, I thought for me, for a young guy in this offense, might have been the biggest thing that we've seen. There is some turnover at Tennessee. Some offensive linemen got a big 5-star in Lance Hurd, the transfer, with some new replacements, some new guys coming in. How do you see the offense as a whole being this year?
I think in early December, if you would have asked me, I would have said the offensive line could be a real weakness, because Cooper Mays at center was considering going to the NFL. And I think John Williams was considering that as well. So you have that, and then you have Lance Hurd come up as well. So I think that Tennessee's offensive line actually is a strength. Now, they've got a left guard that they would like to get figured out. They had Andre Currig, who transferred from Texas, and he didn't really hit the ground running last year. So no offensive line's perfect, but I think that Tennessee's should be a strength heading into this season.
Dylan Sampson, and you got Selden and Keith that will be back in the backfield. How big is it that Wright leaves with a more, I don't want to say younger, but more maybe inexperienced running back room?
Yeah, and he just absolutely lit it up too. I'm talking about Jalen Wright at the Combine, ran a 4.38. So I think we underestimated him a little bit. I think that's very fair to say. I think that Tennessee, and I think earlier I said John Williams, I meant John Campbell. I apologize for that. I think that Tennessee at running back should be good with Cam Selden as far as an all-around, can do everything, speed, size, ratio type of back. But I think Dylan Sampson's going to be their go-to guy, because he's one of the team leaders. He's small. He's on 190 pounds-ish, but he is a guy that can make people miss, and is probably the most dangerous player that Tennessee has with the ball in his hands. And Khalifa Keith, who you mentioned, is going to be a short down running back, I believe, maybe even occasionally when they use a fullback or perhaps an H-back role. So Tennessee, along with Jabari Small, who went to the NFL as well, certainly took a hit in the running back room. I don't think there's any question about that. And with what Jalen Wright did at the Combine, you've got to wonder if it's an even bigger hit than we thought. So, yes, Tennessee, I do not expect to be as explosive out of the backfield as perhaps they were a year ago, but their offensive line should keep them consistently strong up front.
Mike Matthews was a guy that I thought, at least for me, Dave, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the new incomer, the freshman, that could be something special. Do you have a lot of – I know you talked about you don't really put a lot on a lot of young guys, but considering how good he is and what he has been, do you – and in this offense that Heupel runs, do you think that he can be a contributor this fall?
I do, but I think you have to look back at Tennessee's history. So Matthews is a 5-star receiver, one of about 8 5-stars that Tennessee has been able to get under Josh Heupel. And I think he's very, very good. And I don't want to shortchange him at all. But here's a couple things you have to remember about Josh Heupel's offense. One, he tends to settle on the wide receivers. Now, the tight ends will alternate because they don't substitute during drives.
Right.
So he said because they don't want the defense to be able to substitute. So he tends to settle on the same three receivers. Now, the tight ends will alternate from drive to drive. Running backs or individual and different, depends how they feel. So you very easily, I mean, Matthews could show up and live up to the billing and not find a place on the field until garbage time in the second half, and that wouldn't surprise me. It's not to sell him short. I think he's going to be a very good player, but Brew McCoy is a receiver they have that I think is going to be healthy, and I think they'll have enough players they feel comfortable about where they won't have to go the Matthews route, but we'll see.
You know, it's interesting, Dave. A lot of things are changing in college sports. The microphone and the helmet mean one thing. I'm really interested, but about what Josh Heupel, who wants to run tempo and hurry up, would say about something like that. But what would you think for him? And I know that he hadn't really been asked. Maybe he has been asked. But with a style of offense like his, what do you think that this does for a Tennessee who get a helmet in the quarterback's helmet or microphone? Excuse me.
Yeah, well, he has been asked, and as typical, he said, "Oh, it doesn't make much of a difference." Because, by the way, if you haven't noticed it yet, now Blake, it will completely ruin all Josh Heupel interviews from this point forward. He is the best at saying stuff without saying anything at all, by far. Right. I mean, by far, and takes pride in it. Has even left the press conference saying, "Bet you won't get anything out of that." All right, so could it be an advantage that Josh Heupel's not willing to tell us about? Certainly. Mm-hmm. Right now, I think they're pretty comfortable with how they communicate. But if you're giving Josh Heupel the ability to do anything a little bit faster or a little bit more efficient as far as relaying plays, I think that's got to be a good thing for Tennessee.
I completely agree. I think it makes him a little bit more dangerous. I don't think, like, I agree with you. I don't think he's going to say anything. I just think it makes him. Because, I mean, if your quarterback's able to give signs and you're able to change it, I mean, you can move even faster, maybe, if you wanted to. Who knows? Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports, with us. I know a lot of people talk about the offense, and I think this is a conversation that I've had multiple times about Tennessee. You bring in a five-star guy like Jordan Ross defensively in recruiting, but then you got to do like James Pierce. I think Dave, maybe you can correct me. I think that the thing for me that I've seen with Tennessee that nobody talks about, but just says, yeah, it's okay, cool. But nationally or even in the conference, Heupel's recruited pretty damn well on the defensive side of things. Maybe it's because of how explosive they are and what they do offensively. Secretly, they're building something really special on defense in Knoxville, in my opinion.
I think so. And with Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator, I think he's okay with this program being built the way it is, because you have to remember, when you built a program around offense as much as they have, you're talking about practice at times will get cut short so that you can work on this offensive play, whereas the defense has to kind of stand around and watch. So I think Tim Banks is comfortable with that. I think he's comfortable with the fact that he has to come up with twists and stunts, and he has to create big plays because the score theoretically should be on his side. He doesn't have to worry about the run as much. So I'd heard a couple of different schools made a run at him. I think it's big that they kept Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator. Now, as far as James Pierce, if you want to have some fun with your friends, say who's most likely on Tennessee's roster to be picked number 1 in the NFL draft, and the answer isn't Nico. The answer is James Pierce.
Right.
Because I think he is that good. You're a little bit younger than me. You may not remember this name, but Leonard Little would be a comparison that Little's former teammates have thrown around, and he was a borderline Hall of Famer. So I think Pierce is very good. He had a off the field issue with a traffic incident in which probably he wasn't as compliant as he should have been with cops. But assuming that's not a sign of more things to come, listen, I'd like to be his agent tomorrow because I'll take 5% of $45 million, which I think is what the first pick in the NFL draft gets.
With pass rush guys, Dave, and historically.
By the way, that's $2.25 million for those wondering.
Seems like you know the math very quickly. Maybe
I've done it.
Right, or you're just a mad genius. Either one works here. What's interesting with him, and at least with this Tennessee defense, I was surprised how physical they were. When you have a finesse offensive team, I think what gets missed is just how physical they are, and him specifically. He's not just a one-trick pony. He was doing a lot of really good things in run defense. What is the ceiling this year, in your opinion, for just Tennessee as a whole now that we have the expanded playoff?
I think it's ceiling, I'll say make the Final Four. I'm not going to say they're ready to win a championship, but I think potentially getting in. I don't think they're good enough to beat Georgia yet, but let's say they slip into a 12-team playoff in some sort of backroom way. Maybe they lose to Georgia. Well, they could lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game. Right now that they're just doing seeding instead of conference sides, it gets pretty confusing. So, but if they slip into the playoff, I think they could win a game. I still don't think they're as good as Georgia. So I would say that's the ceiling of being the second-tier team, and there's a lot of those. I mean, there's a whole lot of those that are second tier now with Georgia. It used to be first tier, was kind of Alabama and Georgia, I thought, as far as over an extended period of time. Now you have Michigan and what they've done, and I think you got a lot of teams that are right there. They're going to be knocking at the door for Georgia, but right now I would say that's Tennessee's ceiling at this point.
Last thing for you here, Dave, and I know it's been the talk of college football here with the NCAA investigation, them saying that they're not going to investigate NIL moving forward. I guess from where you sit and everything that's going on, what do you make of college football now? I mean, in my opinion, I don't know if we're ready in reference to there being no enforcement, but I also don't think it was right for the way that the NCAA has done things. My question being in all this, did this court case just completely eliminate, in your opinion, the NCAA? And are we ready as a sport to go into a place where there might not be any enforcement?
Here are my thoughts on this. We are in a place where there's going to be very little enforcement. We are in a place where the next story you're going to hear within 6 months is going to be in some shape or form, the players are going to unionize. In fact, that's already in place with the NCAA, what would it be, 2025 football game, which with the video game is coming up by EA Sports.
Right.
So that's already in place. So you're going to have them unionize, and then you're going to have the schools actually take the money, because right now the school has to look at a booster and say, would you like to help build this building? Oh, wait, you're paying for the quarterback. Oh, well, we can't get that money. So you got two people going after the same money, which I guarantee you UT can say all they want about Spire Sports, but they don't like that because Spire Sports gets their cut. And that's Tennessee's Collective for those that don't know. So right. I think the schools will end up paying. And then that's where I get to the answer to your question. If the salary cap, which I believe will be set, is $10 million, and Blake Ruffino's ruffians of the New York State area, they spend $10 more, you get hammered like SMU back in the day. You get the death penalty. You spend $1 more than what you're allowed to spend, you get the death penalty. So does that mean the NCAA does that or not? I don't know. Does that mean they just run the basketball tournament, which is all they got left financially? Maybe. But when there's a salary cap, that's when enforcement comes back. And if you break that, you've broken the one cardinal rule left on the table, in my opinion.
Do you think that the conferences are going to be the one that unionizes with players, or is it just going to be a collective whole, in your opinion?
That's a great question. I I get the feeling that other than the SEC and to some extent the Big Ten, that the conferences aren't smart enough, and there's a businessman out there that will end up putting it together, that they're more likely to do it. But I think Sankey's incredibly smart. Not love the leadership at the Big Ten, so one of those could come up with it. But you're right, and you started the show today with a great point. Who are making these decisions that we're talking about? I mean, I don't know who's making the decision of when they're going to pay, what they're going to pay, what the penalties could look. It's a very, very, very strange time.
Well, Dave, we're going to talk about this in about 20 minutes or so. But the 2-minute warning in college football. Okay, well, last year you told me that you wanted a running clock, okay, to shorten the game. I never complained about the game being too long. I mean, it's what I make a living in doing. Sure, that's fine. But I never complained about an extra 25 minutes. But then you had a 2-minute warning, which is a TV timeout that the NFL said last year that they got to reduce because it's a 5-minute and 50-second timeout, TV timeout. And I'm just like, okay, well, you're just adding more into it. But the thing for me, Dave, that I just question, like Ross Dillinger comes out with a report and says, industry leaders. Well, who in the hell is an industry leader? Because maybe somebody can tell me, but I just don't know who they are anymore.
In the NCAA, I don't know. The guy's name suddenly escapes me, but the NCAA president, his office is in Manhattan.
Baker.
Yeah, Charlie Baker. His office is in Manhattan. It's not even in Indianapolis. Now, Blake, I understand with the powers of connectivity, we can do all kinds of interesting things. But if you're going to run the NCAA for me, I'm probably going to ask that you come in the office. Is that too much? Is that too much? And maybe I'll give you a casual Friday, but how about come into the office?
Yeah, you can wear jeans to work on Fridays. Be like the rest of us.
But just Monday through Friday coming to the office. That would be great. If you don't mind, since you're the president.
Well, and look, I'm not a political person. I don't really care. But when you hired a political man to make political moves, what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah.
Look, I don't care what side you lean on. It doesn't matter. Leave me alone. That's my politics. Leave me alone.
I'm the same way. So in 25 years, I've never shared my politics, be it conservative, be it liberal, whatever the case may be. And I made that decision 25 years ago when I started my career. So I'm not going to do it now. But I'll tell you this, they're both pretty good with getting an easy paycheck. Both sides are pretty good with calling the NCAA up and say, I could sit in my Manhattan office and think about football and you could pay me.
Well, and what's funny, my grandfather, God bless his soul, before he passed, he said that, Blake, here's the truth. They're all sitting in a ballroom drinking a scotch on ice, laughing at all of us. And so it is what it is. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us. This has been fun. We'll have to bring you on again when the season gets here, even maybe before that if Tennessee wins it all. Tell everybody where they can catch all the things that you guys are doing. Love the show and everything that you are doing as well.
Yeah, just go to offthehooksports.com. Offthehooksports.com. We've got content up there. We've also got some pretty neat things that we're proud of. I wrote a book about the 1998 national championship Tennessee team, and then we've got our actual in our merch shop a picture of the actual lawsuit that was filed by Tennessee against the NCAA. So if you want a T-shirt of that, I'll probably hook you up with that.
Okay, so as soon, guys, the produce team, I'm going to go buy me a shirt. That's what I'm doing when I get off the show.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I may even throw in, I don't know if you're interested in reading about the 98 championship Vols, but I'll throw in a book as well. How's that?
Well, I wish I could turn the camera around. So in the studio here, we have all of our stuff. I have a bookshelf right here. I would love it.
Sweet.
I would love it. Well, my wife says, why does it take you so long to read? I'm like, well, I have a public school education, but at least I'm trying,
That's right. I got my PhD from Powell High Diploma after 3 years of PMS, Powell Middle School. There you go.
I feel that. Thank you so much, Dave. I greatly appreciate you joining us, man.
Be good, man. I'll be in touch.
All right, thanks. That's Dave Hooker.